Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to Cafe Oleh with Nefesh B'Nefesh. My name is Jay Rosen. I'm a volunteer with Nefesh B'Nefesh. I myself made Aliyah with them close to 15 years ago. And here at Cafe Oleh, we go over the practical, everyday Hebrew that you need here in Israel that you may or may not be getting taught in Ulpan, which is Israel's intensive Hebrew language courses, or that you learned in university, or maybe you never learned. But that we need for everyday life here in Israel, that really does set you up for success. So whether you've already made Aliyah, you're thinking about it, you're in the process of it, these lessons are really meant for you to help you with the everyday conversation, the everyday terminology that you need for life here in Israel. As such, we have a lot of people from different backgrounds here. We focus on a more intro level here, so it's a little bit more frontal. And we make this as user-friendly as possible. So what questions you have, we want to answer for you, whether it's specifically in this course or in future courses. We really want to hear from you what topics you want to get covered that are applicable to all Oleh, right? It's not just about you and your needs, but what can we pull out of it to make it a lesson that's helpful for everyone. So as such, a few ground rules and a few guidelines as we move forward. Number one, a recording of this will be up on Nefesh B'Nefesh's YouTube channel in the next few days. And if you want to see any of the previous lessons, just go to youtube.com, type in Nefesh B'Nefesh, you'll see recordings of our previous ones. As I go along and present the vocabulary for today in the lesson, you're welcome to screenshot, you're welcome to old school, write down the words. But again, you'll have a recording of this. Also, if you have any questions, if you're joining us on Zoom, while I'm presenting and you have a question specifically about what I'm presenting, please write it in the Q&A section. Just press on the Q&A button in the menu and write your question there, and I'll try to get as many as them as possible in the hour that we have together. If you have any questions about anything else, you want to critique my English, critique my Hebrew, critique a question, that's for the chat window. Please reserve anything that's not a direct question to me about the lesson to that. Okay, but if you have requests for topics to come in the future, by all means, write that in the Q&A. You can also write it in the chat, just to be sure that we get it. And today's lesson actually is apropos because this comes directly from you, our participants in the past few weeks who've sent us a bunch of different suggestions for topics. And we're really happy to hear that and to hear from you what you want to learn about, and specifically words and topics that you can't just open up a dictionary and find out about, because that's really what this is, right? I'm not a human dictionary. I'm kind of good at that, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here to help you through Hebrew and thus a better guide into Israeli society. And one of the questions was about pets. What are the words that we need to know when it comes to pet care in Israel? This is by no means comprehensive. Number one, because I don't have pets. I want to be very honest with you. I'm not going to present on things I don't know very well, but I did consult a fellow Oleh who recently became the owner of a dog, a very cute puppy, and asked him, what were the words that you wish you had known when you first adopted to impart to other Olim? So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go over some pet care words. Again, we're not going over all the different words for pets, the different types of pets, things like that. Those are things you can look up in the dictionary, right? And that's not my specialty. I want to do the words that you may not be able to know just by opening up a dictionary, but also what can we extrapolate from those words? What can we take out of them to understand a little bit more about Israeli society, the words we use, and in general. So with that, I'm already going to share my screen. Again, if you have any questions, please write them in the Q&A as we go. So let me just open that up, make sure that it's ready to go. Also on my computer. Let's see where we are at. There it is. Okay. So share my screen with you. View full screen. As always, Hebrew with nikud, those are the dots and the bars that indicate vowel sounds in Hebrew, will be on the right-hand side. Transliteration for American English friendly crowd is in the middle, and the English on the left. And I'll go through each of these words and explain if there's anything else that needs to go with them. Okay, so let's start with the top. The very first word we have is leash. Now, you'll hear some other words for leash, but this is one of the more common, if not the most common words, which is retsu'ah. Retsu'ah may sound very familiar to many of you who follow along with the news in Hebrew. This is the term that we use also to describe Gaza Strip. The way we say the Gaza Strip in Hebrew is Retsu'at Aza, or Ritsu'at Aza, right? And that is the same word, Retsu'ah, as leash. Think of it as a strip, right? It's a thin strip of something. In this case, a thin strip of leather or cloth or canvas, whatever it may be that a leash is made out of, is a Retsu'ah. Okay, that's our first word. A harness. Harness is, some older dogs need the extra support. Some of it is about control, is a ritma. Okay, ritma, harness, that's the, those straps that go on the upper body, usually of a dog. Something very popular here in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is considered one of the highest per capita of dog ownership in the world, which is quite unbelievable until you actually do walk around Tel Aviv and you realize it's very much true. A dog park, right? You see dog parks all over the place. This is one of the many terms that you'll hear for it, ginat klavim. A gina is a park or a garden. Klavim are dogs. One dog is a kelev, klavim are dogs. So a dog garden, but a dog park. You'll also see park le klavim. Park is just the cognate in Hebrew for park, but ginat klavim, also understood, gan klavim, all of those will be understood as a dog park as we would translate into English. Two very important words with all these pets that are running around Israel, both dogs and cats. You'll also, those of you who remember being in Israel and aren't quite here yet, you certainly know how many cats we have, both domesticated and feral, meaning running around. So these next few words are very important to keep the animal population under control. Neutered and spayed, right? How do we say that in Hebrew? Obviously, we're going to have words for that. Neutered is misoras, and spayed is meukeret. Now, you will hear one word being used for both genders, right? Neutered versus spayed is usually separated by gender, whether the animal is male or female. And sometimes, just like in English, one word will be used for both, but these are the terms that are used as, again, being told by pet owners for neutered and spayed. So misoras is usually neutered, is usually for male pets, meukeret, spayed for female pets. Okay, and both of these words, by the way, just like all the words we have here, have deep, long connections in the Hebrew language and thus with the Jewish people. Just because we're using it in a modern context, all these words come from ancient sources. So misoras, for example, those of you who remember the story of Purim, Megillat Esther, the book of the scroll of Esther that we read on Purim, you remember that in King Achashverosh's court, there were slisim. Slisim are eunuchs, right? And from the same word for eunuch, we get the word for neutered, right? Neutered is the adjective, slisim are the male attendees who are eunuchs. They're all interconnected. They all have the same shoresh, the same three letters that indicate the meaning of the word, and just put in a different form each time. Okay? So, misoras and meukeret. Okay, let's move on to some more words. Treats. So I like this word because we use this word for human food as well. Chatifim. Chatifim are treats for dogs, but they're also snacks for adults or humans in general, right? Anything that's called a chatif is some sort of snack. So in Israel, you're probably familiar with bamba and bisli, tapu chips, which are potato chips. It's actually a brand name that's used for a lot of potato chips. Anything that's snack food is a chatif or chatifim, the plural. Same thing with pet treats, right? The thing that you give beyond the regular food is or are chatifim. Chatifim is the plural, chatif is the singular. Me'alef. Me'alef, male, me'alefet, female, is a trainer, right? A dog trainer, a horse trainer, any kind of trainer specifically for domesticated animals, but maybe not, perhaps, but any kind of animal trainer is a me'alef. Okay, and then related to the word le'alef, which is to train, and is this word, a training cage or crate. Now, I was told this word, in general, kluv means a cage or a crate, excuse me, like what you would put an animal in, either to sleep or to store, or in this case, training, right? Kluv iluf is a training cage or crate. So for puppies, younger animals that need to be trained where to sleep, or to make sure that they stay at a certain space, this is what you're going to know. But in general, a cage or a crate that you're using for an animal is a kluv, right? Kluv iluf, if we put those two words together, the one in the parentheses as well as the one before it, it means a training cage. But any sort of cage is just a kluv. Okay, let's move on to row 12. Aggressive. Unfortunately, just like in other countries, here in Israel, you may encounter an aggressive pet. That word is tokfani. Okay, tokfani is aggressive. A human can also be aggressive. This is all in general the word for anything that's aggressive or violent is tokfani. Someone, or in this case, a pet, that is showing aggressive behavior, tokfani. The next word, this is a very interesting word, a muzzle, right? A muzzle in Hebrew is a machsom. Machsom is also the word that we use for a checkpoint, right? It comes from the verb lachsom, to stop or to block something. And a machsom as a checkpoint is something that stops traffic, whether it's at a border or within a city that's put up by police or military, something along those lines. A machsom as a muzzle is the same thing, right? It's put on usually a dog's snout, and it's used as exactly this, think of it like a checkpoint, to stop the dog from opening its mouth. In Israel, technically, dog owners must muzzle their dogs before going on public buses, for example, or in other places that are public spaces that are also contained, so like a bus. And you'll see this quite often, that a dog or the owner will have the muzzle sort of latched onto the collar, and then just before they get on the bus, they'll put it on the dog. Sometimes it's not enforced, but that is, I believe, still the law here in Israel. The dogs must have a machsom, a muzzle, just as any other, just as they would in other countries to have a muzzle for dogs. If you see a dog with a muzzle, by the way, in Israel, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's specifically tokfani, that it's aggressive. It just may mean that they are training the dog, or they got off or on a bus recently, and thus it's still there. It doesn't necessarily mean the dog is tokfani, is aggressive. This is a great term. It's a great name of an organization, which is Tza'al Ba'alei Chayim. Tza'al Ba'alei Chayim is two things in Hebrew. One, it is the Hebrew name, the Israeli name for the SPCA, the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. This is where a lot of people will adopt pets from, right? Because they're rescue pets from other people that didn't treat the animal right, if not abuse them. This is the equivalent of the SPCA in Hebrew, in Israel rather. It's called the Tza'al Ba'alei Chayim. Tza'al Ba'alei Chayim, those of you who have a little bit more Jewish knowledge in your back pocket know that this is a prohibition in Jewish law not to mistreat animals. And from that concept, we get the Hebrew Israeli equivalent of the SPCA. Really nice tie-in, I think, for modern state of Israel. Okay, so let's move on to some other words. Again, these are for pet lovers, pet owners. People are interested in pets. People want to talk to each other about pets. Again, here in Tel Aviv, where I live, pets are a big deal, be they dogs or cats or birds or any of the other interesting animals that they have here. We're not going to go through all those, but just sort of the general terms that you need for them. Okay, very important term, omna. Omna is foster, right? And this is foster in all sorts of respects. This could be fostering kids, like foster parents. This could also be fostering a pet, be it a dog, a cat, anything that you're doing before formally adopting is umna. Very important. Those of you who have yet to have a pet or are looking to adopt a new pet, but you first want to make sure that you get along with each other. Just like in other countries, you have the same opportunity here in Israel to be a foster dog, cat, pet owner before you formally adopt, right? And that's this next term, le'ametz. Le'ametz is to adopt. And that comes with paperwork, whether it's through the Tzal Ba'alei Chaim, whether it's through other adoption agencies. Le'ametz is to adopt. This is obviously can mean to adopt in other contexts, to adopt a child or a baby, to adopt a new strategy. Anything to adopt, just like in English, is the verb le'ametz. Okay, next term. Gur. Gur, I translated here as puppy. We have another word in Hebrew that's very specifically a puppy, which is klavlav. Klavlav is taking the word kelev and making it a little bit cutesy-poo. So it becomes klavlav is a puppy. But a gur, or gul, is any young animal. And it's best translated more as cub. Right, so you can certainly have a gul and it be a puppy, but you can also have a gul of other animals. The classic one in Jewish tradition is gul alyeh, a lion cub, right? Or a bear cub, a gul dov. Anything that's that kind of cub that you would refer to in English can be a gul. It's also a name, particularly a first name for Israeli males in Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, but it's generally known as a puppy. Okay, I like this one. It's cute. Something you would do with a dog, maybe with a cat, depending on the cat's disposition. Meshichat chevel. Meshichat chevel is tug of war. Meshicha, we've had this word before. It comes from the verb limshoch. Limshoch is to pull. So meshicha is the act of pulling. And chevel is a rope or any kind of taut string, thick taut string. So pulling a rope, that's what you do in tug of war. We're a little bit more literal in Hebrew, right? It's not literally meaning tug of war. It means pulling rope is meshichat chevel, tug of war. Sa'atzua is a toy. That can be any kind of toy. So if you think that this is just dealing with kids' toys, it's not. A tzatzua is any kind of toy. So for a pet, any kind of, toy that you would get for a pet is a tzatzua. A collar. This is a nice simple word for those of you just learning Hebrew, kolal, right? Kolar, the accent, like in most modern Hebrew, is on the last syllable. So kolal is a collar. Just a nice cognate from English to Hebrew. I like this one. This is a great way to say how you create in modern Hebrew the term housebroken, right? Very important for pets to make sure that they're housebroken, so you aren't always cleaning up after them, or if you are, at least it's contained. How do you say it? For a male pet, you would say that they are mechunach latzrachim. What does this mean? Mechunach is, it literally means educated. It comes from the word chinuch, which is education. So mechunach is educated. And tzrachim means needs. It literally means needs. It's a euphemism for going to the bathroom, right? So educated towards their needs, literally mechunach latzrachim, means housebroken. Right? They know how to take care of themselves. They know how to take care of their biological needs. In this case, going to the bathroom. So mechunach latzrachim, housebroken. Good one to know. This is a good one that's important to know because you've probably heard this word before, especially again, those of you with a more Jewish literacy. But it's important to make a distinction here. Is the word mazon. Mazon does get translated as food, and you won't be incorrect. but we use the term mazon when we're talking about food for an animal in the context of the word in English, feed, right? An animal gets animal feed. We can call it mazon la klavim, mazon, food, la, for, klavim, dogs, right? In English, we would say dog food. In Hebrew, we're going to use the word that really more means feed, to indicate we're not giving them human food. We're giving them food that's specifically for them. Mazon can mean food for humans. But when we say the word, when we're talking about food for humans, we more usually in modern Hebrew use the word ochel, right? We've had that word before. Ochel is food. In this case, feed for animals, be they domesticated, be they farm animals, whomever, is mazon. Here's a slight difference in your everyday terminology. An important one because quite a lot of Israelis love cats and have cats at home, and this seems to be a rather basic one that everyone needs to know, is kitty litter. How do you say kitty litter? Again, these are things you can look up on your own, but I figure if we're doing some of the basics, let's keep it really basic, but also essentials. Chol lachatulim. Chol in Hebrew is sand, right? Kitty litter is not necessarily made of sand. It has sand as one of its ingredients. Chol lachatulim, it literally means sand for cats. Okay, sand for cats, kitty litter, chol lachatulim. 25, shavav. Shavav is something you've probably heard about with regards to in fake news, with regards to humans, but with regards to pets, it is not fake news. Shavav is a chip, meaning a microchip, not like a chocolate chip. Shavav as in a microchip. In Israel, you can implant a microchip into your pet, specifically dogs, so that if they get lost, if they run away, if they're kidnapped, the authorities, veterinarians, so forth, can scan them, and it's usually just on their neck or just below their neck, to scan them and be able to find their dog's information, including their owner. Right, so shavav is a microchip. You have this in other countries as well for dogs, maybe for other animals as well, but certainly for dogs, it's an option here in Israel. An important term, not just for pets, but for humans as well, it's the summer. Summer is particularly a hot season for pests in Israel, insects. Can we talk about pests? Excuse me. And pest control, right? Pest control is hadbara. Hadbara, is the catch-all term for pest control or insecticide, anything you're doing to remove pests. When it comes to pets, it's things like fleas and ticks. When it comes to your home, it's cockroaches, ants, wasps, any of those wonderful creatures is hadbara. Hadbara is the act of eliminating pests. And when we talk about pests, we're not talking about feral cats or anything like that. We're talking about insects. Anything that's, again, with regards to pets. So fleas, ticks, mosquitoes even under hadbara. Okay. And two last words. Again, it's pet ownership. It's a really straightforward lesson. There isn't much more to pull out of it. I just want to make sure that people have some of the basics when they're considering adopting or fostering a pet. The first one is two commands that you'll hear all the time on the street. Certainly here in Tel Aviv, again, with so many dog owners, you'll hear these two terms quite a lot. The first one is shev. Shev is said to a male pet, shvi to a female pet. Shev is the command for to sit, right? It comes from the verb lashevet, to sit. So shev is the command form. And so you'll hear dog owners in particular saying to their dog, if it's a male dog, shev, shev, or to a female dog, shvi, means sit. And then the last one is arza. I like this one as the last one. I'll explain in a second its extra connotation. Arza is also a command, and it comes from the word eretz, which means land, ground. And when you hear a dog owner telling their dog to, saying to their dog in a command, strong voice, arza is lie down. Okay, literally get on the ground. What does this say? Alza is important because alza, again, comes from eretz, land. Alza indicates a direction. Think of the expression in Hebrew, I'm going home. Ani chozer habaita. Habaita is a directional cue for us, right? Because the word for house is bait. So why don't we translate it literally into from the English, I'm returning home. Ani chozer habaita is I'm returning homewards. That's the way to think about this. Alza is landwards or groundwards, right? That that we put it at the end means words, W-A-R-D-S. And we hear this quite often in Hebrew, not just ani chozer habaita, but also things like when you're on the train in Israel and you hear the announcer listing all the next stations, and you'll hear them go up at the end, right? So it won't be Herzliya, it'll be Herzliya or Binyamina or Pardes Chana, right? That at the end, even if it's the natural ending of that name of that town, is indicating we're going towards that city, right? So just like Ani chozer habaita, I'm returning towards home. I'm returning homeward. Alza, I'm landing on the ground or get on the ground. All of these indicate a direction. And so this also brings up something very important for fellow Olim here on this call. How do we say I made aliyah in Hebrew? It is not literally translated, right? You've probably done this yourself. You probably heard people say very incorrectly, translate from the English to Hebrew, I made aliyah. That is not how we say it in Hebrew. In Hebrew, if you want to say I made aliyah, the correct way and the way to impress fellow Hebrew speakers is ani aliti alza. Okay, ani, I, aliti, the act of making aliyah, that's the verb, but I did it in the past, alza or arza. Okay, alza, I made it, ani aliti alza. I made aliyah to Israel. Now, you can't make aliyah anywhere else, except maybe in jest. But this is the way we say it. We do not say in Hebrew, ani asiti aliyah. Okay, sorry to bust anyone's bubble there. It is incorrect to say ani asiti aliyah. You are waiving your oleh or olah identity very clearly, but more that you haven't learned Hebrew as the way it's formally constructed. Ani aliti alza is one very quick way to impress a lot of people here in Israel, right? So if you're going to an office, if you're taking care of your first documents as an oleh, or even years later, and you're describing who you are, ani aliti alza, or ani aliti arza. Okay, that's the proper way to say I made aliyah in Hebrew, not a literal translation from English. Okay, very important one, but alza as a command for dogs is a great segue to give me that. Okay, like I said, very simple, very quick responses, words that are important to know that you wouldn't necessarily be able to look up or think to look up on your own. I see a couple people have already asked in the Q&A, can they get a copy of the spreadsheet? Absolutely, you can. When you find the recording of this session in the next 1 to 2 days, you will see this recording on the main screen as we go through, as you review the video. So you're going to be able to pause the screen, see all the words that we've gone through here. Okay, let me just open up some of your questions now, as I see we've already gotten a bunch. Anonymous asks, what are the rules for knowing how to pronounce written Hebrew, written without nikudot? That's a great question. You're going to see both in our class here, which is really meant for an introduction level, as well as the more you interact with Hebrew, the more predictable it is, right? For those of you who joined us last week we talked about the passive tense, or the week prior. One of our last sessions was about the passive tense, and we talked about the two elements of every Hebrew word, the shoresh, the 3 letters, the root of the word, and the tavnit, the form it takes. The form it takes are those vowels, are the different letters, but particularly vowels that you put into the shoresh to create a new word. They're very predictable. There are apparently some dictionaries out there that give you a whole list of those. But the point is, they're predictable. And even if you mispronounce it, you're not going to be so far off that a native Hebrew speaker won't be able to understand you. So as you get off learning nikud, those bars and dots that indicate vowels, because that's not how we write everyday Hebrew, that's not how you're going to read Hebrew, you'll be able to predict very quickly, quicker than you probably expect to predict, how to pronounce a word. And even if you're not 100% correct, you're probably going to be 75% correct. And that's really already really good. Okay. Anonymous asks, can we do a class on confusing Hebrew abbreviations and acronyms? Absolutely. We've gone through many abbreviations and acronyms in the past. We'll happily do more. Remember that Israel, the Hebrew that's spoken in modern Israel is as much affected by the history of the Hebrew language as it is by modern Israeli reality. One of those many sources of new Hebrew words, but also the way it's used, is the military. Right? The military plays a big role in Israeli society, and thus the Hebrew that we use, because so many have served in the military. And just like in other militaries around the world, the Israeli military, the IDF, employs a lot of abbreviations and acronyms to describe things. As a result, we have a lot of abbreviations, acronyms from the military, from other sources in everyday Hebrew. We'll go through some of those in a future lesson. That's a great topic. Anonymous asks, how do you say, I will make aliyah? So this is a great point. You don't have to use the future tense. You can simply say, I plan to make aliyah, right? Ani metachnen la'alot artza. Metachnen means to plan, or ani mitkaven, I intend. Either way, both of those are the male conjugation, by the way. So mitachnenet or mitkavenet for female, la'alot artza. Again, there are plenty of people who are going to disagree with me and say la'asot aliyah because they've gotten away with it for many years. I'm trying to get you on the straight and narrow path to tell you, just because you're at a beginner's level, and many of us here in this class are at a beginner's level in Hebrew, that doesn't mean your Hebrew has to be at a beginner's level, right? You're all very educated future or current or past olim. That doesn't mean your Hebrew has to sound any different than the level of education you have in English or any other language. So la'alot artza, to make aliyah. Okay, just remember like that. La'alot artza, to make aliyah. Not every translation in the language is going to be literal. That should be understood if you haven't learned that already when learning another language, but for sure, not every expression, not every term is going to be literally translatable. Asher asks, I want to make aliyah. For male, ani rotze la'alot artza. Or simply, ani rotze la'alot. You can also say, but ani rotze la'alot artza is the correct term. Ani rotze la'alot artza. For a female, ani rotza la'alot artza. Ani rotza la'alot artza. Right? Just depending on how you say the letter resh. Either way is the proper way to say it. Oleh asks, great question. How do you say a rabid dog? So like a lot of, we've talked about this in the past, but I love this, is diseases in Hebrew. Diseases in Hebrew, someone was asking before about vowel sounds and how to read words without vowels in Hebrew. I'm going to teach you a quick lesson right now in how to read words without vowels by teaching you words for diseases. Let me just open up see if I can make it a little bit bigger here. Okay. I'm gonna write down two words here. Sorry. Okay, I'm not going to tell you what these words mean yet, but you're going to already figure it out. There's we talked about tavnit, right? The form that gives you the vowel sounds, that gives you the structure of a word, of the shoresh, of the root, to give you what a word means. I gave you two words here. Okay, I'm going to tell you the root of each of them is, sorry. Okay, and the next one is, sorry, I just want to make sure that it's a big enough font so that you can all see it. Okay, we have this word on the left, this word on the right, two words on the right, right? And then two words on the left. Those two things on the left are the sholesh, and that's how we write out a sholesh, the three-letter root, right? Each letter in its sequence followed by a dot, nekuda. So we already know the word that has this root of kaf lamed bet, right? Kaf lamed bet gives us the word kelev. Okay, what word do we get from the second one? Sadi hey bet. We get the color for sahov, the color yellow, right? So we have one word that we know from this. Kaf lamed bet gives us the word kelev. Sadi hey vet gives us the word sahov, yellow. I take that root, I put it in a form here, which I'm just going to write out phonetically in transliterated Hebrew, which is like this. If I can, which is et. And it's going to be, make that even clearer for everyone. Okay, this root, what you see here in this form, think of those X's as the exact order of that sholesh, right? So I have kaf lamed bet. If I put those in the same order, kaf here, lamed here, bet here, I get a new word, right? I took the sholesh and I put it in a tavnit, and I come up with a new word. Kalevet. Okay, I can do the same thing with the same root here. If I take this one and put it here, and the same plug-in, right? It has to stay in the exact same order. That's how Hebrew works. It's algebra. Sahevet. Kalevet. Sahevet. I put it in the exact same order it shows here on the right, on the left rather, put it into this tavnit. The sholesh gives me the meaning of that word. So the first one had to do with dogs, second one with yellow. This one, a-e-et, has to do with diseases, right? So I take the word, I put it in the form that specifically refers to diseases in Hebrew. All of a sudden, I have a disease that's connected to that. So what's a disease that's connected to a dog? Rabies. Kalevet is rabies. Why? Because traditionally, kalevet was understood, rabies was understood to come from klavim, dogs. That's how we get the word for rabies in Hebrew. Second one, sahevet. What disease normally gives you a yellow appearance or is typified by the color yellow? Sahevet can refer to jaundice or in general hepatitis, right? Because hepatitis is a liver disease. Jaundice is one of its symptoms. Jaundice is yellow in the eyes, the bile from liver that is improperly synthesized in the body or however it comes out. The point is, I've just given you both the question about what's the word for rabies and the question for how do we read without vowels, right? If I saw this word kalevet or this word sahevet, I would know how to pronounce it because it would be in a context about diseases. I could look up the other words around it to understand I was doing something about suffering from or developed or symptoms or anything like that. But if I see these two words, I know they have something to do with a disease, whether it's spoken to me or not. And I can figure it out by starting to look at what is the sholesh, what is the root of this word, and maybe I can understand the tavnit, the format it's taking. Okay, so a rabid dog. A rabid dog, we would normally say in Hebrew, kelev nagua bakalevet. A dog who has literally been touched. Nagua comes from the verb lagaat, to touch, or affected, you could think of it as. So kelev nagua. Typically, when you see in the news a report of a rabid dog, and it does make national news because small country, right? Or a report of wild animals that are rabid, it'll say the such and such animal, nagua. If it's being formal, it'll say nagua be kalevet, a dog who has been afflicted or who has contracted rabies. Okay, so very important word that you have. Ola then asks, how does one say feral cat in Hebrew? So we have a couple different ways to say this. The one that you're going to hear the most, and I'm going to write this again here on the screen since we already have it open, is copy. A full okay. A feral cat is usually referred to as a chatul parua, or para, or pere, or para'i. Any of those words here on the right-hand side will refer to a wild cat, but in this case, not a wild cat like a cougar or a puma or something like that, meaning a feral cat, a street cat, is chatul parua. Right? It is not domesticated, or it has and it's escaped and it's no longer domesticated. It's a feral cat. Certainly in Israel, we have no lack of them, just like in many places around the Mediterranean. But that's the term you'll most likely hear when referring to a feral cat. Kathy asks, is it okay to say bati ba'aliyah? No. Sorry. It's lalot outsa. If that's hard for people to say, asiti aliyah, I'm not going to say I'm going to let you get away with it, but just know that that's just taking the literal translation from the English. That doesn't mean it's correct. It's just the literal translation. You can also just say aliti, right? Just use the verb to make aliyah, which is la'alot. You can just say aliti. Oleh is asking a very complicated question about vowels. Oleh, I'm just answering her. This is the automated Nikud generator that I use online. It has to do with something called imot kriya. It's really complicated Hebrew, even for advanced learners. Just know that the way I spelled it is the way you typically will find it, because Nikud are not typically found in writing. So that's the way it's generated to deal with this very Semitic thing called imot kriya. We can answer that at a different time when we talk about vowels, although it's so complicated. We're going to wean you all off Nikud soon enough. Okay. Elisha, I heard a joke about a bus driver who told a passenger that he was allowed to bring his dog onto the bus if the dog was leashed, but not otherwise. He said, Asur mutar, mutar asur. Would an Israeli actually use these words in such a situation, or just make for a clever pun? If the dog was leashed, but not otherwise, asur mutar, mutar asur. It's a little too smart alecky. You're not going to hear that kind of. The words asur means forbidden, and mutar is the opposite, means permitted. If you see Alicia's question, he's asking. The passenger replied, "Asur mutar, mutar asur." That's what is forbidden to one is permissible to the other, and vice versa. It's a little too smart alecky. It's not that it won't be understood. It's just it's a little smart alecky. Think about that in English, how comfortable you would feel being like that to someone else. It's a very clever pun, for sure. Susan asks, can you also say chatul rechov for a feral cat? It just means a street cat, right? Rechov is a street or a road. Chatul rechov, you can say a street cat, and it's understood. Same idea. Ora, great question about the automated Nikud. It's a website. Just type into Google Nakdan, Nakdan. Anyone else who's interested in finding automated Nikud. It's very complicated if you are not at a more intermediate level or advanced because it'll give you multiple options. Remember that Hebrew is very conservative, right? So just because it's written one way means that it actually could have multiple pronunciations. It's all about context. But Nakdan is what you're going to look for, and you'll see it. I think it's a pretty cool website, especially for someone. Very few people know the actual full comprehensive rules of Nikud in Hebrew, including in the Academy for Hebrew Language that standardizes Hebrew. So everyone don't feel intimidated by Nikud, and if you get it wrong, no one's going to judge you on that because, again, we don't write with Nikud normally. We just use it when you're learning Hebrew and to make sure you have the right pronunciation. Alicia asks, how do you say my dog is vaccinated for X? So I did not put vaccinated on here for a purpose because if you've been living in Israel for the last year and a half, you know the word for vaccinated, right? We all know this word, mechusan. Same word for dogs and cats and any other pets. Vaccinated, mechusan, male, mechusenet, female. I didn't put it on here on purpose because we've talked about that word quite a lot. But if you don't know that word yet, please make sure that you know what it is for yourself, if not for your pets. Mechusan, mechusenet, vaccinated. Steve, this is all meant for beginners. This topic may be specifically too much for you, but that's why we take the time to put the vowels on here and transliterate. And because we have so many different people joining us, we typically have hundreds of people on this call. We really try to make it as user-friendly as possible, which makes it very frontal. That's what makes it a little bit more beginners. If this is too much for you, and the previous classes were for you, by all means, Nefesh B'Nefesh has a very comprehensive list. And by the way, for everyone, as on their website has a very comprehensive list of public and private Hebrew language learning resources, be they in person, be they software. Please check out their website for further suggestions, but this is a free service we want to be sure that everyone has to answer everyday questions, right? This is not meant to supplement formal language training, just everyday Hebrew needs. But thank you for asking. Any last questions? Okay, as always, thank you again so much for participating. Toda rabah. If you have any other questions, any other topics that you'd like us to present on, you'd like me to present on, please be in touch with Nefesh B'Nefesh. Please write to us. We'll be happy to consider it for future lessons. We already have a bunch coming up that are recommended by you, suggested by you. I already see a bunch here, like abbreviations. I'll be happy to go over in the future. But again, toda rabah, thank you all for joining. You'll get a copy of this on Nefesh B'Nefesh's YouTube channel, so don't bother waiting for an email or anything like that. Check tomorrow, check Wednesday. You'll be able to see this recording up on the Nefesh B'Nefesh YouTube channel, and you can watch it on demand as much as, or as little as you want. If you want to follow, again, the words that we went over, do a screenshot of them, write them down. By all means, follow along on the YouTube account. So again, toda rabah, thank you all so much, and I will see you all again next week. Litraot, take care.